Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, the subject of discussion for this panel this morning is going to be increasing broadband access and digital skills through partnerships. My name is Baz Abrahane. I am the Dean of Information Services in Kansas City, Kansas Community College. And for those of you who are not familiar with us, KCKCC is a public urban community college that serve two areas, Leavenworth and Wyandotte. Our online program, however, reaches students all over the world, so I like to think of KCKCC's campus as the entire world. We couldn't do that without partnerships with community organizations, and many of our students come from financially disadvantaged families, so access to broadband is one of their academic challenges. To give you a frame of reference, when I started working at KCKCC back in 2005, we literally had 7 megabytes to the internet broadband access. Today we have 2 gigabit connections to the internet, and I have with me here on the panel 3 participants. Chipto Kusitan Buckner, she is from the Kansas City Public Library. She is the Deputy Director of the Kansas City Library, and she worked there for approximately 30 years? 25 years, and before that you were a board member on the library system, I think, in Missouri?
No, not really. No, I've just been working on the library. I'm a member of a lot of boards in the community.
Okay, so I looked to your LinkedIn account, and it showed that you were a member for 5 years on the library system in Missouri.
Oh, weird.
So you forgot about that?
No. There's what's called a Mid-American Alliance, Mid-American Alliance, which I'm not the president of the board, so that's probably.
Oh, okay.
I need to work on my LinkedIn page. I need to clean that up.
And I also have Rick Dean with Connecting for Good. Dean has co-founded Connecting for Good in 2010, and their primary focus really is to develop a program that creates digital inclusion for low-income families in Kansas City area. And I also have Greta Clark from Dodge City Community College. Greta has been the Director of Multicultural Education for 10 years now, and she played an active role in building a community-wide coalition to define Dodge City's current and future needs and resources to ensure community members have access to and understanding the use of information technology, particularly the use of internet. I will let each participant introduce themselves, and I have a list of questions that I will address with the panel members, and then I will open the floor for the participants to ask their own questions. So let's start here with Chipto.
Thank you. I am Chipto Kusitan Buckner. I am the Deputy Executive Director for the Kansas City Public Libraries. As you had in the panels that have been discussed, libraries are really key to access and literacy. And also there are the anchor institutions in the community. Libraries are going to be there forever. And I think as we think about how we deploy connectivity, where we put our resources is thinking about those anchor institutions. Is that it, or do I need to say it? Okay. So I think what I'm going to talk a little bit about today is that one of the things that I think is very important is for libraries to take leadership roles in their community in trying to provide access. After all, we are a democratic institution. After all, we are very trusted by the community and that kind of thing. And I always say library is the Switzerland of all organizations. And so for us to take that leadership role is very important. And so when Google came into town, the digital divide has been around since the 90s when the connectivity of the internet came around. But what Google was able to allow us to do was raise the consciousness of how the digital divide was really huge in our region. And the library really felt that it needed to take the leadership role. We already had the expertise in bridging the digital divide to really make a difference in the community. And so one of the things that we did was to bring together various organizations in the community to sit down and talk about how do we really scale what we are doing? How do we collaborate and work together to truly, truly bridge the digital divide? Because I think the danger all our communities have is these silos that are going on. Silos, cancers, no. Anyway, but these silos that are going on where each institution has their digital divide initiatives, their digital literacy initiatives, and they are not connected. And so are you really bridging the digital divide or just offering services? So how do you scale it to really do that? So put together a group of community organization. We met for a year and then put together a digital inclusion summit, which we had about 250 people that came to that summit in October 2014. The goal for that summit was to really identify what was going on in the community, what were the priorities in the community, what were we missing, where were the digital deserts, what is it that the community really wanted us to do to bridge the digital divide. And if you go to, I'll leave you a website called digitalinclusionkc.org. It's a new website that we put together that basically is a clearinghouse for all the digital inclusion initiatives currently that we know in Kansas City. You can go there and you can actually search on the database to find where Wi-Fi connectivity is, where public access computers are, where any classes related to digital literacy are available. You can actually take some classes online. A lot of the resources that Connected for Good have developed are already on that website and various things. But the key thing too is that there is a report that we produce out of the summit, a 39-page report that you can actually get on that website to really kind of understand what we're trying to do. But I'll tell you about the 10 themes that came out of the summit that we are going to be moving ahead with. Number one was, what came out of the summit is that we needed to create a collaborative movement across the digital inclusion initiatives. Bring them together, connect them, make sure that they are connected. But also there's this conversation that people kept on talking about. We don't need to form another organization, we need a movement. Okay, we need to go out there and really preach to people about digital inclusion and that kind of thing. So that was one. Second is reframe digital inclusion around geographic and organizational lines. 3 more minutes. I'm moving fast. Reframe digital inclusion around geographic and organizational lines. You guys, we are from Kansas, we are from Missouri and that kind of thing. The whole entire state line when it comes to the digital connectivity becomes a movement. And so how do we work together to actually make that and forget about the borders that we have. Also, it was also this idea of that we are prevented from our structural, our funding, organizational structure, our boards from really partnering. How do we get away? How do we get to be able to do that? Build stronger awareness of real opportunities and aspirations. Let people know why it is important to get online. But also give people, even the young people, that they can succeed in the digital world, that they maybe should be thinking about, doing coding as opposed to turning the youth into, instead of consumers of the technology, to actually be creators of the technology. This was very important. I never thought about this, but it's very important. I think to bridge the digital divide, you've got to involve faith-based organization. You need to work with your churches. You need to work with social agencies that are already existing on there. Some of the comments, and you'll see in the report that came out and say, we had to edit some of the comments that were made in there, but somebody says reduce the sum on a church and have a digital inclusion class. But again, how do we engage faith-based organizations and that kind of thing? Meaningfully engage businesses in digital inclusion. Make them understand that building the workforce development of the future is very, very critical. And they need to be involved. They need to be actually supporting digital inclusion initiatives in the community and that kind of thing. Take advantage of cross-generational opportunities. The comment on this was, if young John, who is 16, is already very familiar with technology and is living home with grandma, how do you actually have John teach grandma how to use the technology? Maybe he gets a stipend, maybe he gets hours for community service, maybe he gets credit for doing that, but how do you take advantage of that? Addressing concern, risks, and fears. This was, people are very scared of identity theft online. Several things that are going on, but this one for us locally, it was very interesting. What we found out was that 70% of the kids who go to the Kansas City School District do not have internet access at home. 70%. That is crazy. And so the school district started a one-to-one program that they gave to the kids to take home. Well, what was happening is kids were scared to take their laptop home because they live in a very high crime area and they're scared of being mugged. Okay? This is a serious problem. So digital divide is not just technology access and digital services. There are some underlying social issues that need to be addressed. Barriers to access extend well beyond technology issues. Clearinghouse, that's what we created, aggregate the information, but the biggest thing that came about is how do you sustain it?
These are some fascinating thoughts. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Now we listen to Connecting for Good. Rick, you have it.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Now let's get this way. So, quick question. How many of you were here yesterday afternoon in this room? Anybody? 2 of you? Cool. Sorry, you're going to see some repeat. So I'm Rick Dean, Connecting for Good. Just a little bit of, one of the questions that's never been addressed in these presentations is why should you listen to us? Just because we were picked to be on panels, does that make us an expert? Well, personally, I've been working in the digital divide since the late 90s. I've been doing mesh networking for low-income communities since 2007. And if you know anything about mesh, that was the pioneering days when this kind of stuff was just getting started. I've been teaching people how to use the internet since '96. So, yeah, it wasn't much of an internet back then. But so we've been doing this stuff for a little while. Now I know we represent all over the country, all over the state, but this is going to tell you a little bit about the problem in Kansas City, and I'm sure that there are some similarities in your communities. We have 50% of Kansas City, Kansas residents don't have internet access in their home. By a recent report, we were number 7 in the country of the least connected cities. Mind you, all that information was prior to Google coming to town. Okay. 80% of households in low-income minority neighborhoods do not own computers or have a static internet connection. We put the word static in there because a lot of them did have some sort of access on their phones, but that was about the best that they had. You already heard 70% of students, both on both sides of the state line. It varies a little bit on both sides, but the numbers are pretty close. Both school districts, Kansas City, Kansas, and Kansas City, Missouri, have started a one-to-one program sending laptops home. But how much good does that laptop do if they don't have an internet connection at home? Right? 78% of low-income families reside in multifamily subsidized housing.
How did you arrive at those statistics? Like if other communities are wanting to know what the penetration rate is of broadband for like a student in their house, how did you get those numbers?
Part of that was provided by the school districts, and part of it was through our own surveys. Last year we hired a graduate student from UMKC to do some research for us. So a lot of that came from him. So Connecting for Good has a 4-pronged approach to solving the digital divide. First, we receive donated computers, and we refurbish them and load Windows 7 on them and then sell them back to, we use a Microsoft Citizenship program to sell, so it limits who we can sell them to, but it also dramatically reduces our costs on buying the licenses. So we can, for as little as $75, put a computer back in the hands of a low-income family or a nonprofit. then, you know, it's not enough to just give them a computer. You got to teach them how to use it. So we do digital life skills training. And we'll do that for absolutely anybody. We don't care who attends our classes. In fact, we've had millionaires from Leawood, which, you know, is kind of our high-end neighborhood in Kansas City. And we've had them in our classes just wanting to learn how to use the internet. And we've had homeless people come in to learn how to use it so that they could try to find a job. So the complete range. Then we do free and affordable internet. We've got two mechanisms for that. One, well, we have a list, depending on where they live, of where they can go to get an affordable internet connection. Because unfortunately, a lot of the places like Time Warner won't advertise that they have that $10 a month plan. They don't want people to sign up for it, they're losing money on it. So we tell them how to advocate for themselves on that. We also have a new program through Mobile Beacon, which some of you heard about yesterday, where we can sell them a Clearwire 4G internet connection. It's $45 for the equipment and $10 a month for the service. That's unlimited 4G internet. The other thing about that is it's so situated so that we don't have to, there's no credit checks, they don't have to have a bank account, they can come to us and pay cash. And by the way, they can put all of that, except for the monthly service, on layaway. So if they can't afford that money all up front, we'll take it a little bit at a time. And in a minute, I'll talk more about our last internet option. And then we build public access computer labs, community technology centers. We've built several, well, we've personally built 2, and then we partner with several others around the community. We're engaging in contract. By the end of the year, we're expecting to have 20 computer labs around the city, that be public access labs that people can come in and use. Those are
For free?
for free, yes. What do people get out of digital life skills classes? Well, essentially, here's some of the benefits that they get, but essentially what we do is we take them from a diagram of a keyboard and explain what each of the keys do to having an email address and knowing how to send an email with an attachment. We call that internet on-ramping. And we figure once they get to that skill level of being able to send an email, then we've pretty much launched them onto the internet, and they've, you know, and part of the process we teach them sites like GCF Learn Free and YouTube, and you know, so many people think YouTube is just where you go to watch TV, but it's one of the best training sites in the country. I haven't found a question yet that I couldn't get answered on YouTube. All right. Who did we reach last year? We trained over 2,000 people in our classes, spread across 244 sessions. Maybe that's about, on a work day, that's about one a day, one class a day that we averaged last year. 25% of them have never used a PC, 75% are 50 years old or older, 80% are minorities, 75% are low income. So you get an idea of who we've been serving. And then last, I think this is the last piece. The last thing that we did, we got a grant from the One Economy Corporation in 2012 of some equipment and some cash to pay for broadband internet. And we built 3 mesh networks. This being our largest one, that is Juniper Gardens, which is the largest housing authority project in the state of Kansas. That is 12 city blocks of community Wi-Fi, providing free internet access to all those residents. And we have 2 other properties just like that. Hi, Aaron.
Hey, Ray.
And this is is a lab, to give you an idea. And this is truly about the partnership. I just need one more minute, and I'm done. Yeah. This is a building across the street from Juniper Gardens. It's part of the network. It was, 2 years ago, it was a bar. And it was a real problem for the neighborhood. The Housing Authority got a HUD grant to buy the building. Didn't know, they figured they were going to tear it down. I went to Tom and said, so if you don't have to tear that down for environmental reasons, I got a plan for it. He goes, okay, you can have it. And they remodeled it, they pay the utilities, they do everything. And we come in and we run, they have 20 seats in there. We also have our refurbishing operation in their office. We're there Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. We're getting ready to expand hours. And that is what we want to create 20 of in our community. All right.
Thank you, Rick.
Transitioning from the northeast corner of Kansas out to the southwest corner. I'm from Dodge City, which is a town of 30,000 people, just under 30,000 people. Due to the beef packing plants and the manufacturing industry, we have about 28 nations living in the community of 30,000 people. So we have a very richly diverse population. And we mentioned the silos of Kansas. Interestingly, about 2012, when we went to the first digital summit, we were learning about the anchor institutions, schools, libraries, and health organizations. And so I, at the college, and the director of the public library in Dodge City, and the community information specialist in the city, got together and formed this leadership team. Mostly, I want to tell you, though, in terms of our partnerships, we have our anchor institutions where our primary jobs are, but we haven't had any very formalized structure. And so what we have done is we went to the high school and we talked to the USA Skills instructor, and we said, we know that you've got students in your classes who are quite literate, savvy in digital, and also they represent the nations of people that are in our community, the ethnicity. And so we have, on an informal basis, organized that those students are our literacy skills instructors. So those students come from the high school to the ESL classes at the college, go to the senior center, and each of our pockets of literacy trainings, we use these students. And they don't really get anything formal for it. Now, and I think you mentioned one of the themes in your themes that came out of your summit, they don't actually get paid. They don't actually get anything specifically at this point. We would love to grow and have a sponsorship or something like that, but at this point, they just get experience. They get, they develop relationships with those older seniors. They develop opportunities for their own leadership skills to come forward, and we talk with them about putting it on their resume. In fact, Andrew, the young man that's here helping Angela and Stan, he's one of our Dodge City Community College students who we met in the high school last year. His father was, his parents are from Vietnam, had them in our ESL classes years ago. Now, this young man is, helping us. It's a delightful opportunity for him. It's a wonderful, he would never believe that he'd be interning at a conference. It's been really a successful endeavor. However, it's not formally structured. So we, of course, intend to grow and see where we are a year from now, but that's where we are today. And so I would like for you to think for just 1 second, if you have a pencil in your hand and you've got an answer, write it down. Who in your community, we didn't know the high school instructor well. It wasn't a previously formed relationship that connected us. We just went coldly in there and said, who teaches? So who in your community would you write down yourself, if you have a pencil in your hand, that you might reach out to? Not someone you're formally connected to already, but who might have an avenue towards some help?
Thank you, Greg. I really appreciate your feedback and comments. Before we move forward into talking specifically about partnerships formed with these organizations, I would like to ask the audience, how do you define partnership? I want to make sure that we all are addressing the word partnership as it truly should be. Does anybody have any answer to that?
Give and take relationship.
Give and take relationship, like mutual?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Any other thoughts? Because sometimes organizations or even individuals characterize a relationship as a partnership, but it really isn't a successful partnership. The purpose of this panel is to discuss successful, efficient, effective partnership. And like it was characterized, partnership is a mutual relationship where the outcomes are agreed upon and responsibilities are also agreed upon. So this is the type of partnerships that we're discussing here. I would like to start.
Just a comment too. I think there are degrees of partnerships and recognizing where you are in that relationship, because there is kind of that first stage where you're both putting your names on things and you're kind of working together.
Defining responsibilities.
Right, and then there's the stage that you described. And then I think when you reach true collaboration, it gets trickier because you're mixing resources, you're having to deal with different organizational cultures, with policy issues, right? And that's where it gets me where you can
Where it
get
becomes mature afterwards.
right, amazing results, but there's a cost to that because it requires managing that.
Certainly. So my first question would be to Chipto, I'm sorry. I am so
Just
sorry.
think about
Chipto.
chapter.
Why should society and businesses in particular care about equitable access to use the internet? Why is that important?
You know, it is, one of the things that I started terming access to the internet and access is a civil rights issue, it's a social justice issue. People term it as a utility, but it's different than a utility. You go to pay for a utility and that kind of thing. Those who do not have internet access are really left behind from education, health, economic development, workforce development, and even social connections. Because now, in a lot of ways, the way you communicate and connect is through email and social apps and that kind of thing. And so without that, it's very, very critical for those particular reasons and that kind of thing that you have it. And I think it's a right. It's certainly a right for every individual to have access.
Is it a birthright?
I don't think it's a birthright, but it's a right. It's a civil rights issue. It's a social justice issue. You must, you've got to have access to succeed. I think also for the United States, in order to compete with the rest of the world, if you look at our connectivity versus North Korea, not North Korea, South Korea, my goodness, no. But it would be amazing if North Korea did that. But you look at South Korea, you look at Japan, you look at a lot of other places out there that are doing this, and our competitive edge is being challenged because we do not have all our citizens connected.
Well, these are great thoughts. Thank you. Rick?
Yeah.
Some thoughts from you on that?
You know, I just have, we see every day what happens to people who don't have access. And to see the stories, to experience their hardship, to see the lives transformed. You really, it's hard to put that into words to see the change that happens.
Would you rather have electricity or internet access? If you were had to choose one.
I think the internet's probably, to answer that question, when the power goes out of my house, it's my phone that gets me connected, to
So
the
you would
internet,
choose
so that I can call the utility companies.
So you would pick internet?
Yeah,
Okay.
although the internet doesn't really do much good without power.
Well,
Except,
without power.
except I would use the internet and move to solar for my power.
I think we have to add on there too, it's many of our people who don't have the literacy or the access to use the internet do sometimes go to a resource as a young student or someone else in the family that does. And they might get their their work done, maybe, financially somehow. But it's a matter of self-esteem issue, and it's a self-confidence issue. And when you start chipping away at self-esteem or adding on to self-esteem, makes a huge difference in your society, your community's well-being. And, the confidence factor, I think, is very critical.
Well said, well said. So let me look at this from a different angle. We all agree that there's no debate about how important digital skills and internet access broadband. But the only challenge that we all have here is financial arrangements. We all talk about the importance of partnership, but there's the financial aspect involved. So I would like to go for each one of you, and you tell me, how did you manage financial arrangements for the partnerships that you formed with other community organizations that you're working with? Rick, you want to start?
So as far with respect to partnerships, it's really got to be an equitable trade, where it's not necessarily money. I'm not paying the people that I provide a lab to or going to do a training in, but they have some resource that they provide. I have some resource that I provide, and it just works out to be a pretty fair trade. Sometimes they have the building and I have the computers, something like that. Now, with the Housing Authority, in particular, that partnership, they had a problem that they wanted solved. They had all of this money that they spent from a HUD grant to purchase this property, and imagine if they had to take all of those taxpayer dollars and turn it into a field of grass. Like, what sustainable change is that going to create? Yeah. So by being able to save the building and then put that building to a good use, the use that property desperately needed, and that community, and this center is not just open to the residents; it's open to the community. That's one of the stipulations that that we agreed to. So, we had all this investment, and now we're putting it to good use.
Is there a way that you measure your return on your investment? I think the problem that I'm seeing with some of these partnerships is that I am an investor or an organization and you would like to form a partnership with me. You are going to benefit from it. You're pushing out services. You're obviously helping the community. But as an organization, why would I move forward with such a partnership with you? And how can I measure the return on my investment? I guess that's the question that I would like to ask.
I think I would say libraries have been collaborating since, I don't know how long. We have a lot, from resource sharings and that kind of thing. I think in terms of the collaboration for the digital inclusion initiatives and that kind of thing, what we did, and I'll give you just a small example, but as we were working on the summit, we needed to find money for the summit. And we had about 15 organizations that were planning this. So what we did is we jointly went out there and actually fundraised for the summit. We put the money, there's an organization called the Community Foundation in Kansas City. And so we created an account inside the Community Foundation and put the funding there so that it was not in one entity's general fund and that kind of thing. It was in this foundation part of it. And they trusted me enough to be the one to execute the funds to put together the summit to be able to do that. I think moving ahead, as we create this digital inclusion coalition for Kansas City or the greater Kansas City, what we are asking the city is to really, in a lot of ways, to have the same passion about digital inclusion as they have for arts, as they have for different kind of things. You have cities who have 1% for public art, why not 1% for digital inclusion? And forming the coalition, putting a structure in place, so that you maybe have an advisory council, different kind of committees and that kind of thing. But that's, I think, in a collaborative environment, you want those structures in place so that everybody feels that their voice is being heard. So the structure that I look at is that we would have an advisory council of all the players in the city that needs to be on that table to talk about that, and then working with task forces to move the initiative forward. That's what we're looking at right now. In terms of what Rick has been talking about, in terms of when we are trying to create the whole entire community learning centers, it's a partnership between Connecting for Good, Literacy KC, the city of Kansas City, and that kind of thing. Again, working together, the library will bring its strength into the field, they will bring their strength, and then we'll see where we need to seek additional resources to actually complete the community learning centers.
This is really good. So who are your target demographic populations and why? Why did you select those demographics?
We chose the urban core. Part of it, for example, we worked with the Kansas City, Missouri School District, working with the IT director. This goes back to the demographic information, or the stats that we were able to get. And we asked him to pinpoint, where is the digital divide? We did a little bit of work with Google and trying to figure out where people were not signing up. And use that to kind of target some neighborhoods. The digital divide, we actually, based on that research we did last year, we know the center of the digital divide.
And that research was conducted by the KCMO school district? Or?
No, that research was conducted by a graduate student at UMKC. And that was, we worked with him to do that research. And he pinpointed the neighborhood where the digital divide is the highest. And then the other part is, for example, Google a couple years ago did a survey, 25,000 people across the metro, and it came up with some numbers that we thought was staggering. Some original stats that were like, what? And then we went out and we did our own surveys, and they're showing like 17% showing no access or something like that, and that was higher than the national average. I don't remember exactly what the numbers were, but they're like, what? 17%? That seems ridiculous. And then I went around and I did a spectrum survey inside of a Section 8 property out of 170 apartments. There were like 8 wireless networks. And those 8 wireless networks represent that 8 people had internet in their apartment. Like, oh my Lord. And then we went around and we actually knocked on doors and we did a survey and we found that 80% didn't have access in that one property. 80% of the residents didn't have, not even on their phones, didn't have access. We're like, no wonder you can't get an education, no wonder. And then they tell the stories about getting to the library, and they're like, for those residents, they had to walk a mile to get to the other side of the train tracks because the bus won't cross the train tracks. They had to walk a mile with kids to get to that bus, to spend an hour on the bus to get to the closest library, to wait 2 hours to get 45 minutes. Like, it wasn't worth the effort.
In our community, rather than having any particular area that we know, we decided to go into the local schools. The schools are spread all across the community. And we know that with the K-12 and the college initiative of having iPads in every child's hands, that those parents would be comfortable going to the schools. The school, big problem and big interest of the school is parental involvement. So as we develop our student workers and arrange times to go into the school libraries, which takes a little logistics getting organized, and then letting those parents come to those particular schools that work, it's our plan that's really feasible. Everybody wins. The parents walk in the schools and do something they want to do, and we don't have to have any extra resources in order to help them. So.
Oh, sure. I think if you look at some of the Pew Research out there, it pretty much tells you where the digital divide is in the community, and actually has very good demographics for the Hispanic community, the African American seniors, and those with low income. Even Google study that they did in Kansas City actually mirrors the national study. So I think first of all, you start over there to look at that. There's now a new research that was recently done with the recent census that will tell you, I think one of the questions that they asked in this past census was whether you have internet access at home. So there's that new data now that you can look at it. But I think, it's not only the underserved that do not have access. We talk about relevancy, it's seniors that also might be, economically well-to-do, and so, but they don't have access. I think when Google came into town and they were looking at who was not signing up or did not find relevant, some of the people that did not have access, if you know Kansas City, live in North Parkway. So I think in terms of, you have to think about the totality of it and figure out how to actually look at it as a community, not just one area, but how do you really get everybody engaged in the community? And there have got to be different strategies for different communities. It's not a cookie cutter approach. I don't think that you can do that. And then I think you look at, pockets, you mentioned immigrant communities, how do you connect with those communities? But I think for you that are looking for a playbook on how you do it, I think it's really, really important to look at the entire community and not just an area. Now, in terms of priorities, really going into the underserved community is very important. The city of Kansas City did an initiative called the Urban Neighborhood Initiative, and they identified an area that they were going to concentrate resources of everything, early childhood, charter schools, economic development, and that kind of thing. And we thought one of the places to start was there because the city was already focused in that area and putting resources in that community.
Very good thoughts. I have one more question, and I will give each panelist 1 minute to answer, and that is, if you were the president of the internet for one day, what would be your 3 most important executive orders that you would make in that day? Rick, do you want to start?
Ubiquitous
You have
access.
the power now.
Ubiquitous access. Every house gets fiber. Period. I don't exactly know how, but I would figure out a way to protect our children from the threats online. And I would,
So access, security,
really that's my 2, access and security.
okay, Greta?
If I were the president, I would want every single person, no matter where they are, no matter what age they are, no matter what they do, I would want every single person to have a certain amount of time where they had the opportunity to do something with a device.
So build digital skills.
And so they would have fun doing it. They would see that it's doable. I want them to see that it's doable.
Okay. Anything else?
That's primarily it.
Okay. Chito?
I am the president, not just kidding. But if I was the president, I would
Of the internet.
Oh,
Let's be specific.
hey, listen, I'm just, I can dream, okay? After all, the current president is a Kenyan American, and I'm Kenyan American. It's possible. But if I was the president, I would do what the current president just recently did, which is the community broadband, and making sure that every particular municipality has the ability to put in their own community broadband so that they can provide access to their people and that kind of thing. My second executive order would to make sure that the anchor institutions, schools, libraries, hospitals, each has connectivity, has the resources to actually continue to provide what they are doing now. There's no use to reinvent the wheel. And if I was the president, I don't think connectivity to the home is necessarily the answer to everything. And that's why it's very, very important to do that because of this factor. In our community, 40%, the same school district that we have, 40% of those kids have 2 addresses within a school year. So unless you are a homeowner connectivity to your home makes sense. But if you're a renter and you're moving, you need to be able to do that. So I would make sure that every child and every resident of a city or a community is a block away from access.
Great. Well, this concludes the discussion questions that I had for the panelists, and I'll open it now for the audience. If you have any questions, please.
With the talk that you guys have given, and knowing that Kansas has a lot of rural, and everything has been talked about the community and leaving the block away, how would you address those that live in a rural area and not necessarily in a community?
You know, I think that is where churches come in and schools. I think churches, after the whole entire idea of faith-based entities, put a public computer center inside a church. Okay, all the churches in the rural areas. I think the mobile beacon solution where you can check out our hotspots, I don't know whether the connectivity is there, that would be another place where your libraries, your local library in rural areas can actually check out hotspots to those particular communities. So I think that's important. Another thing that came out of, and when you look at the report, digitalinclusionkc.org, there's a report that we produced. One of the things that, an idea that came out is that, you know, at the end of the day, when the kids go home, and the connectivity in schools are there, why don't that Wi-Fi or that signal be broadcast to the homes around the school area? So why not? Why not? So those are some ideas that I would say.
I think we're looking for improvement, not perfection. Not that we don't strive for the highest, but at this point, in a very realistic mindset, you know, we want to improve what we can get done, what is doable now, to the point that more people have more than I live out in the rural, and I think it's going to be a pretty tough order for some of those very rural communities. But do what we can, looking for improvement.
Just to give you an idea, we had a guy reach out to us, I think it was in November, lives about 30 miles south of here. Fairly rural community, you know, he could see his neighbors, but it'd be a bit of a walk to get to them. And he's like, his only internet option out there was satellite, which isn't much of an option. And he reached out to us and said, is there any way that you guys can get us internet? And we worked with one of our local partners. And it was going to be a little bit expensive. It was going to cost about $2,000 in equipment and about $300 a month to get him internet via microwave. But then he turned around and he got 5 of his neighbors to connect to do a little co-op. And now all 5 of them have internet access. They're all sharing a 30 meg internet connection, and it's costing, you know, that $300 a month divided by 5 is now affordable for them.
That's a great story.
That kind of a story can be done anywhere. Microwave can go a long ways, and it can go a long
May I
ways
ask who the
affordable.
provider is? Who is the provider?
His name is Ben. He's an entrepreneur that just started a company called Packet Layer, but he's reselling through a company called CTC, which is an old wireless ISP in Kansas City. They're one of the first WISPs in Kansas City. So it's a combination of infrastructure that makes that happen.
Because there's another provider, Mercury Wireless, who might also, for other parts of Kansas,
They are.
might be a potential as well. And I think part of it too is I'm a Mercury customer because I live out in the country. And one of the things I think that has to be people made aware of is that they can actually do that. You know, so you can
Right.
actually go together with your neighbors and aggregate some demand that
Right.
would then persuade a provider to come in.
Sure.
Excellent point.
Yes, sir.
Is there anything on the horizon technology-wise that in 5 years, microwave technology, satellite technology is deemed to be too expensive right now to use, but is there anything technology-wise that we can foresee in 5 years that would make that cost cheaper for?
Actually, it just came out. They've made some amazing, I can buy a radio for $300 a link, $320 a link. That'll shoot 450 meg, 20 kilometers. Now, granted, that's not going to work in the city, but it'll work in rural. And that's a lot of bandwidth to get out to the community for not much money. The biggest expense is tower links. That's where the monthly expense comes in. And that's all over public spectrum, so, no licensing. It's easy. That equipment, it just came out in the last couple months. Now they've got microwave dishes that'll do up to 2 gigabytes.
But I think one of the elements that may change the landscape a little bit in the future is the competition. I think in the past there used to be very identified providers that everybody go to for internet service. Now we see more competition. So typically when you see competition, the price and affordability becomes the limiting factor there. So I think in the next 5 years, as you see more competition in the market, that will drive the price down and also enhance the services. Because this is how you keep and build a loyal customer base. So this is what I think.
And the recent move by the president is going to change a lot of things. What he has done and directed the FCC to do, which is looking at all the cable laws and the state laws that prevent competition and the monopoly of cable companies. That's going to be very, very dramatic. I think if whatever things are changed on there, where a municipality can put together their broadband network. I mean, a good example of what I think most cities should be doing is Chattanooga, where they have their network is run by a municipality, so there's a connectivity whether you turn it on or not. There's a connectivity in the office, in the home, in the various areas and that kind of thing. I think that's going to be important. I think internet, the white space is another technology that is out there. It's not new, but it's something, again, opening up, FCC opening up, some freeing up of some of the channels that you could actually be able to do that. But I really do think the move by the president and competition is going to be key. You can see Kansas City, Kansas City, Missouri is a good example. Before Google came in town, AT&T was not talking about gig connections. Comcast was not marketing to anybody. And then Time Warner, who I was a customer for so many years, I never got any literature for them. Now that I'm not a customer, I get a mailing from them every day. So I'm irritating. But anyway, I think competition is going to be the key.
You're absolutely right. Yes.
This is just a comment on, because several people have mentioned using white space, using that analog spectrum that was previously used by TV, by network TV. My library actually did a pilot using the white space and actually did not have a good experience with it. So much of wireless technology relies on line of sight. Microwave does as well. And so I think while it's definitely a strategy in the long term, just as satellite does. I mean, because again, I have DirecTV too. Weather, big hills, wind, all of those. None of us, even though people think Kansas is flat, it really isn't. And so I think there are some fairly large barriers to entry, especially for folks that don't know any of this stuff. And why should they have to?
Yeah.
Why should you have to be a technology expert just to have broadband?
You're absolutely right.
You should know. Yeah.
And if I were to give some closing remark for this, I don't know if we have any more questions or not, but I have a couple comments to make. Do we have any more questions? This conference has been great. I've been really thrilled with some of the thoughts that I learned from coming to this conference and the people that I have met. But to me, when I think about this whole concept of broadband and digital access and put it into a simplistic form, I think we really need to focus more on what the value is when we provide broadband access rather than discussing and focusing on the broadband access and the price and the cost and what is it that our new generations and schools, public libraries, society, organizations will benefit from that, and try to raise awareness of these values. It would be more like me trying to get a job, and I am questioning whether I should drive a Cadillac or a Fiat to work. I think we need to focus on what the job is that is going to be done and make sure that we have in place a systematic approach to develop digital skills and then make the case for making the broadband available for those people who are going to benefit from that. So with that, thank you very much.